Q&A, take scene one, take two, and action.
Hi there. Today we're here to talk about my medieval noir series and the last book in the Crispin Guest series, The Deadliest. You've sent me questions, I'm here to answer them. So let's just begin. What inspired the use of holy relics? Well, when I was first learning to write a medieval mystery on the recommendation of a former agent, because I simply could not get arrested with the historical novels I was writing, I had to pick up at least some of my favorite books of mystery. And one of them, because I wanted to write a hard-boiled mystery, something different from your regular medieval mysteries where there was a monk or a nun as the detective. I wanted to write a hard-boiled detective. So I picked up one of my favorite books, The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett. And I literally took that book apart, page by page, paragraph by paragraph, beat by beat, until I figured out what made the hard-boiled mystery. And besides just the Sam Spade character and the various other characters and how it all figured itself out, I really liked the Falcon. The Falcon was just kind of this mysterious thing that everybody was interested in. And it was a mystery. It kept being a mystery, and spoiler alert, it was even a mystery by the end of the story. So that translated to me into religious relics or venerated objects. And I could put these in the book to be something added value, either the most important part of the story or just something off to the side that gets everybody into the story, or something that's even just vaguely part of the story. So we've had in the past, things like a Veronica's Veil, or the Crown of Thorns, and venerated objects like the Philosopher's Stone and Excalibur. And so these have become very fun things to add to the stories. Okay, so looking back on the completed series, are there any decisions you made that you would choose differently if you could do it over? Well, yes. I think that I would have had each book be a different year, advancing the timeline. For the first, I think, 3 books, I wrote it set in 1384, because I really had the idea that I liked having one sheriff, Simon Winchcombe, as the antagonist. Remember, in hard-boiled mysteries, you always have a lieutenant or a captain that harries the detective. So I wanted to have him. But that's wrong thinking. That was bad, because they had a new sheriff every year. So instead of just going with the new sheriffs, I was stuck on this idea of just using the same one. Wrong. So don't do that, people. If you're writing one, go with the history. Always do that. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So the next question, do you do primary research or mostly secondary? If you do primary research, what is the best rabbit hole of research you got sucked into? And did you use it in a book? And what's your fave research that you've never used, and why? Well, number one, I don't do primary or even secondary research because I don't read Latin or medieval French. And that would be your primary research on documents and letters and things like that. And so I need tertiary research. I need somebody who already translated that stuff and also puts it in a narrative that I can understand and absorb in textbooks, history books, things like that. So, and one of the best one for this time period was by Nigel Saul, called Richard II. And I think it's pretty much the definitive so far about Richard II, if you're researching that. Because to me, he puts it together like you should. Like, I need it. Because a lot of researchers today and historians like to do these biographies. Oh, well, let's start here, but we'll connect it to here, and then this is all out of order. And no, I need it in order. I need to find out how things progressed. So Nigel Saul is great for that. Plenty of footnotes, plus an itinerary of Richard II of where he was. So I could take year and month and know where he was in England, which palace he was at. So that helps me to write with him in London or pick the right month, and because I'm picky, because you're picky. So what was the best rabbit hole of research? And what's your favorite research that you never used and why? It's kind of the same point. You've probably heard me tell this story before, but it was a footnote. Footnotes are very important. Don't ever leave out the footnotes when you're doing research. It was a simple little note about accidental deaths in London, what people died of accidentally. So women apparently died from drowning, which makes sense because the women and the girls are the ones carrying the water, doing the laundry, going to fetch the water, going to the rivers, going to the wells, and all that. But men died from falling out of windows. And I thought, well, what? Let me go find out why. Well, what's the story there? Well, first, let's think about London at this time period. It wasn't very wide. It wasn't spreading out because the land outside of the city walls, the Roman walls, the old walls, were owned by other people, so it wasn't spreading out that far, that much, that yet. It did so later, of course. So when you needed to get more real estate, you went up. You built a second story and a third story. And the people that were your tenants, well, they just had some rickety old ladder to get up to that third floor because they're not going to bother to build a staircase. So men would have a night of drinking, perhaps, and then they'd go to bed, and then they'd wake up in the middle of the night, and they needed to accede to a call of nature. And so instead of going down that rickety old ladder in the dark while you're still kind of drunk, they just went to the shuttered window, opened it up, and misjudged. Splat all the way to the ground. So you could see how that would happen. There's actually a term for that. It's called defenestration, because it happens so often. So that's my favorite thing that I didn't actually get to include in a book. But someday, you never know. Did you conceive of Crispin as a fully formed character, or was he an evolution as you wrote the first book? He has definitely grown over the years. Well, in a way I kind of did. I knew who he was a little, but I just sat down really and thought about it for 2 years, and thought about him as the character, what other characters could be involved, what situations could be, what crimes, what are the relics that could be, and that was okay, but I really had to figure out why he became hard-boiled, why he became a detective. So I was researching about John of Gaunt, the Duke of Lancaster, and I discovered that when Richard was going to accede to the throne, and the Parliament was worried about John of Gaunt because he was this important statesman, he was a warrior, he was the richest man in London, and they figured he was going to try to usurp the throne for himself, and he assured them all over the place, no, I'm not going to do that. I believe in the order of succession. Richard is the next in line. I'm not going to do that. But there were conspiracies. So I read about that and I said, aha, what if Crispin is involved in one of these conspiracies to put John of Gaunt on the throne? What if he's in there and that's how he loses his title and his wealth and everything? And also, that means that, oh, Crispin is an orphan. He gets orphaned at 7 years old, and he goes to move in to the Lancaster household. He's raised by John of Gaunt. He also meets Geoffrey Chaucer, because he also works in the household of John of Gaunt, and Crispin has a chance to sort of raise Henry Bolingbroke because he becomes one of his governors when he's... So it all just started to tumble together into this long tapestry. And so it was just one of those wonderful moments where it's like, oh, I know exactly who he is. I know everything about him now. And it worked. So, all right, so besides Crispin himself, who was the hardest character to say goodbye to, and why? Well, I guess it's John Reichner, because I really liked him. Now, John Reichner is a real guy, real person from Crispin's time period. We only know about him from one document about his arrest. Now, he was a cross-dressing male prostitute. And when you really start looking over this document again and again, you start to get the feeling that perhaps he was one of the first documented trans people. Could be, we don't know. We'll never know. But anyway, so he was this interesting character, and I thought, well, I need to have him in the book. And I think he shows up in at least 3 books, possibly 4. I can't quite remember. Somebody can correct me. But I really liked him, and he could have his own series, really. But if I did write a series with him, he would become an amateur sleuth, and then he'd have to get help from Crispin, and that would bring Crispin back in the stories, and no, we aren't going to do that. So he's on his own, but he gets a good book on his own with his husband in Spiteful Bones. So he doesn't show up in this one. Couldn't quite squeak him in there. But yeah, I'm going to miss him. But Crispin, of course, I'm going to miss him because like the Scarecrow, I'm going to miss him most of all because he was just this great character. I thought he would be a great breakout character. I wish he had broken out a little bit more, but I still think that he's a fine medieval detective. I'm proud of the work with him. Okay, and so, might we see some or one of these beloved characters cross over into the Tudor novels, or is that the wrong time period? Now I'm writing a Tudor series, Henry VIII series, called The King's Fool Mysteries, about Will Somers, Henry VIII's real court jester, as the amateur sleuth. And, well, Crispin's story begins in 1384 with the first book, Veil of Lies. And Henry VIII's reign begins in 1509. So that's a no. No crossovers. Who are your most unique character creations? Well, I'm going to take credit for John Reichner because he was just a person in a document, and I hope that I gave him some life. But also, I really liked Nigellus Cobb Martin. Now, it's one of my favorite names that I created. He first showed up in A Maiden Weeping. He's a young lawyer, and he defended Crispin in a murder trial. And he was fresh out of medieval law school, and he had just done his first case, a murder trial, that he lost. So he was affordable. So poor Crispin, and actually Jack hires him, and I'm not sure if he met John Reichner in that book, A Maiden Weeping, and they began to hit it off. And in the document about John Reichner, there's a mention of him telling the person that was suing him for gowns he supposedly stole. And he said, well, if you don't like it, you can talk to my husband about it. Well, I wanted to give him a husband, and that turned out to be Nigella's Cub-Martin. So there's a slight spoiler alert for Spiteful Bones. But I think that those were fun characters to write as well. And where do you get your ideas? That's one of the questions that every writer is asked almost every occasion. Where do you get your ideas? Well, where don't I get my ideas? That's really it. I mean, I get them from actual life experiences. I get them from songs I hear. I get it from TV shows and movies and books I've read and music and dreams. And just everything. It just comes from everywhere. It's not this magical thing that just filters down to the... Well, it's a little magical, but it actually comes from all the things that I've seen and heard, from books and museum trips and things like that. So it comes from everywhere. And I guess it's just my weird brain that puts it all together into something like a narrative, like a story. Oh, hygiene. Crispin seems rather fastidious about his cleanliness and clean shave. Was this because of his time as a gong farmer? Now let me remind you, Crispin had lots of weird jobs before he settled on this detecting stuff. And gong farmer is someone who, with their little wheelbarrow and their shovel, go and clean out the public latrines along the Thames and anywhere that those latrines are. Not a pretty job, kind of stinky, of course, but yeah, he did have to do that. But no, that's not where his fastidiousness comes from. He was a lord. He was a knight. He had the money and the servants to have a bath and get clean when he wanted to and have someone shave him, and he particularly liked a clean-shaven look for himself. He didn't want a beard, I guess, so that's what he kept up. Some habits don't go away. How do you go about writing historical books? Research, research, research. First, you have to start with research. And sometimes I take a couple of months before I sit down to write a book. Not just getting the idea of where the plot's going, but researching the little details that I'm going to need to know, usually about people. I have the 14th century down pretty well at this point, but you want to know what people wear, how they wear it, how they clean it, what they're eating, where they're living, what sort of situations that they have to be aware of for etiquette and so on and so forth, and the streets that they're walking on and where they're working, all that stuff. You have to know all of that. And in the early days of my writing this series in 2005, when I was developing it, there was not a lot on the internet. There was not a lot of internet. But now it's wonderful because there's a lot of archives that have digitized documents. So it's nice to be able to go to some of these. Some are free, some are not. But I still find that I need to go to a library. In the libraries I go to are university libraries because they have all the stuff that I need, all the books by historians and scholars that I need to check out and study. So I start there. You always start with research. What's the most challenging thing about writing historically? Well, I guess that's sort of the same question. It's the research. Just what can you find? I mean, I can't trot off to England when I want to, but a lot of the archives, like I said, are available online in the books that I research. And I have scholars, medievalists, and historians that I can ask questions of online, certain forums. So I can usually get most of these questions answered. I sometimes get things wrong. I do my best to get it right, because what you want to do is make sure that your history is correct. Because when a reader sits down with a book and it says historical on it, they expect that the writer has done their homework and the history they're reading is correct. And if you decide on a plot and you figure out this wonderful plot idea, and then you research it and you find out that's not going to work because that wasn't invented yet, or that idea wasn't around, you're screwed, because you have to change that plot. And people say, well, it's fiction, who cares? Well, the readers care. If you want to write alternate history, that's fine, but that better be on your cover. You're writing history, so that has to be right. Because the reader wants to sit down and just relax with all the world building you've done and feel that all the things you're describing are correct, so that they know this is the time period, this is what it feels like. Now they can settle in on the story and not worry about that. So that's the writer's job. The reader's job is to enjoy it. And that's what I've done with this series. I've enjoyed writing it and researching it. And you seem to have enjoyed reading it, and I appreciate that. So thank you again for your questions. This has been fun. And now we can get on with the rest of our book launch.